Hey everyone, welcome back to the Good Doctor's continuing coverage of the Netflix juggernaut, The Crown. I am Dr. Kristen.
I am a slightly laryngetic Dr. Erin, but still here.
Present and accounted for. And we are going to talk about episode 10 of season 3 of The Crown today, Cri de Coeur, although our French correspondent tells us that is grammatically incorrect. And if it should be Cri du Coeur, and that means essentially a passionate cry, kind of a wail of some fashion, and a cry for attention. It can be used as that way, but said French correspondent made a face when I told her how it was used in the episode, so she was not pleased.
So add to the list of things Peter Morgan doesn't quite do right.
French.
Yeah. Let's add that to the list.
So really quickly, a couple key things to know about this episode. Everything that happened in this episode in real life happened in a period of about 5.5 to 6 years.
5 years. Did you understand that from the way that the episode worked? Because I sure didn't.
No, we definitely, yeah. It glosses over some really, really important events in the life of the royal family, including the attempted and bungled kidnapping of Princess Anne, as well as Princess Anne's wedding.
Yeah.
And because I love Erin Doherty so much, I'm really pissed we didn't get to see Princess Anne's wedding.
What? Could you imagine the spectacle?
Oh my God, it would be incredible. And the terrible 70s hats. Yeah, we're going to have a minute for that terrible hat she wore to her Jubilee. Okay.
It was terrible.
So this episode, thematically within The Crown, is important because two things have to happen in this episode in order to move forward to Princess Diana, which we've been told is going to happen next season. One is that we have to set the precedent for royal divorce, which, just to be reminded, if you are somebody who grew up post Diana and Charles, you may not realize that there was about a 400-year gap in royal divorces between
Henry
VIII and it was Anne of Cleves, I think,
and like then 1530 something.
Sure, I think that was wife number 6.
Yeah,
and then
1535 maybe.
1978 with Tony and Margaret. So we need that setup, we need that angina, we need that kind of thing. We also need the closing scene between Margaret and Elizabeth for two very key reasons. One is that nobody understands Elizabeth's role as queen the way Margaret does, whether it's proper or not. We've been proven told over and over again that the only one who really gets that there is only one queen is Margaret, which is why I think we only ever get vulnerability about Elizabeth's inner life with her sister. I don't think she trusts her husband this way. She's also of a generation in which she would have been taught to not trust her husband this way.
And like the only person in her life that has been with her from the moment she found out she was going to be the sovereign when she was like 12.
And like, how do you have friends when you're the queen?
Was her sister. And she didn't. We know she didn't. She had Porchy and that was it. But that was because of the horses. And you can never really trust anyone. And as toxic as their sister relationship is, it is still the longest, most stable relationship she's had in her life.
So so those two thematic things are beautiful. The scene at the end is acted so perfectly. It's a masterclass. It was gorgeous.
Which made me really happy. And then also at the same time, really mad that we didn't get more of that from Olivia Colman most specifically, but also Helena Bonham Carter. Because she was really like in, the early episode where her and Tony went to America, and then she was kind of out of it as well.
Margaretology. So our key frustration, I will speak on behalf of both of us, is that we spent a lot of time in this episode with Tony, who we do not care about, and specifically with Margaret's affair of the day, a gentleman named Roddy Llewellyn.
Super Welsh.
Yeah.
Super Welsh.
Super
name.
Welsh. Yeah. And they cast both actors perfectly because the one they cast as Roddy really does look like, in a lot of ways, Matthew Good. But here's the deal. You can tell a story a lot of different ways, as we have ranted about for 30 episodes now. I don't know if it was the scriptwriter, I don't know if it was the director, I don't know what combination of people decided that we needed to spend over half the episode unpacking why their relationship was toxic.
Like, we already knew this.
We knew this.
They've already shown from the beginning of Margaret and Tony's relationship that it was toxic and cruel and hurtful and violent. I did not need 4 more scenes of it, nor did I need a 7-minute montage of Margaret having an affair.
And there was
minutes are precious.
Minutes are precious, and this did not feel like a finale at all.
No.
Especially now when you think about, like, it covered 5 years, and we could have been talking about Anne. We could have been like, there is no universe on this planet that I do not believe that in the process of recovering from her daughter almost getting kidnapped, Elizabeth and Margaret didn't have a conversation. Like, yeah. I'd really love to see that conversation.
And, like, it was really, really muddled.
Yeah.
The history of the premiership, from how Harold Wilson beating Edward Heath, which was in 1974. Harold Wilson becomes the minority leader, which we hear a little bit about. He comes to meet the Queen. She's like, "Oh, I never thought I'd be happy to see you." La la la. That was 1974.
And then
the next scene with them is his resignation from his early onset Alzheimer's. That's 1976. But to me, I was like, he found out really quickly that he had Alzheimer's, but no, we both looked at each other. We were like, we know Harold Wilson was in for 2 more years, but we know that because we know British history a lot more than most people watching. So, the Jubilee's 1977. I know that the divorce is 1978. So there was a lot of like jumping
around, which is totally, again, you can do that. I don't understand why this was the finale.
Yeah.
In the way that except. So overall, and we'll talk about this in our season 3 recap, the pacing of the season was confusing to us.
Mm-hmm.
We are slightly in the minority on that with some of the critics. There are more critics that like this episode because I think, and they do make a great point, watching Helena Bonham Carter smile is a delight. It's nice to see Margaret happy a little bit. I guess I don't care about Margaret being happy in the way that I needed to see it on this show. Like, I'm glad somebody loved her, but for me, Roddy was always going to leave. And so this wasn't happiness. Like, if I was watching her do a montage with somebody who was finally going to love and cherish her as a human being, I would have loved that 7 minutes. But it felt to me as a viewer who knew it was coming, like watching a train wreck of another person who was going to hurt her, of another person who was going to betray her and leave her because they were far more interested in the princess part of her name than the Margaret part of her name.
Yeah. And for me, the conflating of history and squashing it all together, like the breakup of her marriage, Roddy leaving, and her overdose on pills in the show all happened at the same time.
And they did not in real life.
In real life, they happened over a course of like 3 years.
Yeah.
Which is very, very different. Very, very different.
Because, for instance, it wasn't Roddy breaking up and it wasn't her divorce as to why she overdosed. It's been reported many times that it's because Roddy went on vacation without her and was photographed with somebody else.
Yeah.
That's a very different vibe. Also,
after they had been together for like 2 or 3 years.
2 or 3 years. It wasn't this like, because that's the other thing. It makes her seem like a really desperate woman that she's completely in love with this man and ready to kill herself over this man.
After a week in the Caribbean. After a week in Mustique. Yeah, that is not what happened at all.
So we remain confused. Overall, everything we've said about every other episode of this season is true. We would have liked more Olivia Colman. I would have appreciated, and Tobias Menzies, when he was in the scenes, did a great job. I don't know if the Queen Mum was this hateful in real life, but good Lord, have they done a good job in making me hate her.
She is not a kind character in this show at all.
At all. But in terms of, because we've covered now, we have rapid fire driven through the entirety of the 1970s.
Yeah.
Let's take a breath. And think about what's happening in Northern Ireland, because one of the reasons we knew Harold Wilson's name before this show was that he is very famously the Prime Minister who sent British troops to the streets of Belfast. And that's a turning point in the history of the entire British Isles, whether English history acknowledges it or not, but it's a turning point. And so there's a couple other things that we need to cover too.
Yeah, so that happened during his first premiership in 1968, which we talked about in earlier episodes. But in this period, really roughly from 1972 to 1978, we've talked about a lot of things that happened in 1972 and 1973. There's not a lot to say about Edward Heath as a premier in Northern Ireland. He pretty much continued the same policies that Harold Wilson had established. Harold Wilson was responsible for introducing effectively political status for prisoners in Northern Ireland. So there were political prisoners. He was and continued that through his second premiership. And it was after he resigned, it was a different prime minister that changed the policies very quickly towards criminalization, which is a really huge part in Northern Irish history, because it eventually leads to the hunger strikes of 1981 that a lot of people have heard about. Maybe this show will cover, because it involved a lot of interaction with Margaret Thatcher, who presumably is going to be a very big figure in season 4. We don't know. We've had some online conversations with some people watching this season, talking about events that happened in relation to the Troubles and Margaret Thatcher. The Conservative Party conference was bombed in Brighton in 1974 by 84, by the IRA. So there could be some things that we might look forward to, but because of this,
because they didn't talk
about Northern Ireland at all. I mean, we got a mention of the Ulster Unionist Party when the Queen is talking about the transition of power. From our research, presumably Edward Heath was trying to hold together a hung parliament and would have used Ulster Unionist support because they're technically conservatives in what's called a confidence and supply arrangement, which you don't need to know, but had happened recently in the last 2 years between Theresa May's government, but he was unable to hold that together. So,
spoiler alert, they're never able to hold that together.
That was the only mention that we got of even a political entity in Northern Ireland, was the Queen kind of throwing away the phrase Ulster Unionists. So yeah, I mean, there were a lot of things happening in this period. There were negotiations and ceasefires in 1975 between the British government and the IRA, secret talks, and a lot of violence, a lot of death, and a lot of destruction in a province of the United Kingdom that was, for the entirety of this season, completely ignored. And I know we've said it every episode for the last 7 episodes, but as far as we're concerned, it can't be said enough. So I don't know what they're going to do in season 4 in terms of Northern Ireland. I'm deeply skeptical that they're going to talk about it at all, although the hunger strikes were an international event in a way that a lot of the stuff that we talked about in the 70s wasn't necessarily as covered as big. The hunger strikes in 81 were considered a humanitarian issue by a lot of people around the world. So it might be that Peter Morgan considers that significant enough to talk about. We don't know. But we will be back soon with our season 3 recap, where we'll break down some more of the bigger themes and have more speculation about what we could possibly see in season 4. But yeah, at the end of this season, we are told what we have always known, but apparently what Elizabeth needed reiterated. There is only one queen. Maybe that means season 4 we'll see more of Olivia Colman. I don't know. But for now, that's all we have.
We got Margaret Thatcher on the horizon.
We got Margaret Thatcher. And she is a big looming presence in British politics. So she will,
even after her death now, she will not
go,
is a thing. And the rumors are Gillian Anderson. So,
which would be interesting.
I
haven't checked. They have cast Princess Diana.
Yes.
It's not an actor that we know from other things very well, which makes sense because I think they've done that with a lot of the younger people on the show. But presumably they would pick somebody pretty significant for Maggie because she takes up most of the 80s.
She just takes up all the air in the room,
she
guys.
Takes up a lot of space.
So on that note, we'll see you in their season 3 recap, or maybe in a long time from now, whenever they deign, we'll see you in season 4.
All right.
Bye, guys.
Take care.